No one knew her name. Every single day she was there, before everyone else. She turned on the lights, organized the desks, made the coffee, and every single day, no one asked who she was. She was invisible. Until one day, one person decided to ask a simple question, and that question didn't just change her life, it changed the entire office. But before we continue, let me invite you to do something real quick. If you love emotional, real-life stories that truly touch the soul, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss stories like this. And tell me in the comments, where are you watching from today? I love reading your messages and connecting with you. And if this story has already touched your heart, go ahead and hit the like button. It really helps the channel grow. Now, take a deep breath, because this story begins like this. The sky was still dark when she stepped off the bus 2 blocks away from the office building. She did it on purpose. Those few quiet minutes of walking were the only part of the day that truly belonged to her. No noise, no expectations, just the sound of her footsteps and the cold morning air brushing against her face. The building was tall and modern, all glass and steel. Automatic doors, a wide lobby that echoed even the smallest sound. She swiped her badge, waited for the green light, and walked in, always the first one there. The lights were still off as she crossed the lobby. Her footsteps echoed softly against the marble floor. She switched on one light, then another, slowly waking the place up. The elevator ride was silent. She studied her reflection in the metal doors. Tired eyes, slightly sunken, shoulders already carrying a weight the day hadn't even earned yet. Upstairs, her routine began. She straightened chairs left carelessly out of place, aligned stacks of papers on desks that weren't hers, picked up empty coffee cups forgotten from the night before. She wiped away small stains no one noticed, or noticed and chose not to care about. Then she went to the break room. She filled the kettle, organized the mugs, prepared the coffee carefully, measuring everything just right, as if even that small act deserved dignity. Slowly, the smell drifted down the hallway, announcing the start of another workday for everyone else. By the time the first employee arrived, she had already been there nearly an hour. "Morning," she would sometimes say. Most of the time, no one answered. Some rushed past her, eyes glued to their phones. Others gave a vague nod without really looking at her. A few even spoke around her, as if she were part of the wall. "Is the coffee ready?" "Yes." "Good." That was it. No thank you, no how are you, no name. At first, it hurt. She remembered her first weeks there years ago. She had started with hope. She believed that eventually people would learn who she was, that her name would become familiar, that one day she wouldn't just be the cleaning lady, the maintenance woman, just her. But time passed. The office grew, new employees arrived, others left, titles changed, promotions happened, meetings, holiday parties, farewells, and she stayed, always present, always invisible. Over time, she learned how to take up less space. She spoke softly, walked close to the walls, waited for others to pass before stepping into narrow hallways, said, "Excuse me," even when there was more than enough room. It was easier that way. Being invisible hurt less when you pretended it didn't hurt at all. Some days, she wondered if anyone would notice her absence. If she simply didn't show up one morning, would anyone miss her? Or would they just complain about the trash not being taken out? The coffee not being ready? The lights still turned off? She didn't know. And deep down, she was afraid to find out. That morning felt no different. She finished preparing the coffee, wiped the counter, dried her hands carefully. She sat down for just a moment in one of the break room chairs. The clock ticked slowly on the wall, each second marking not just time, but years. When she stood up to continue working, she heard footsteps in the hallway. Different footsteps. They weren't rushed. No frantic typing, no hurried breathing. They sounded curious, attentive. She instinctively looked up. A woman stood in the middle of the hallway. She didn't look lost. She was observing. The desks, the walls, the employees beginning to arrive. There was something about the way she looked around, as if she was actually seeing the place for the first time. Her eyes landed on her and didn't move away. She looked down. She was used to that too. Glances that passed too quickly, or ones that turned away just as fast. But this felt different. "Hi," the woman said. It took her a second to realize she was talking to her. "Hi," she replied, confused. The woman smiled. Not the polite, automatic kind. A real one. "Have you worked here long?" she asked. She nodded. "A few years." The woman frowned slightly, as if something didn't quite make sense. "That's strange," she murmured. "What is?" she asked. The woman hesitated, then said quietly, "I've noticed that everyone talks to you, but no one really talks with you." Her chest tightened, not because it wasn't true, but because no one had ever said it out loud before. The woman stepped closer. "What's your name?" The question hung in the air, heavy, important, almost too big for that narrow hallway. Her throat went dry. It had been so long since anyone asked, she almost thought she had imagined it. "My name?" she repeated softly. "Yes," the woman said gently. "Your name." She took a breath. It felt strange to say it out loud, as if it had been locked away somewhere, unused for far too long. It's Emily," she said. The woman's smile widened. "Emily," she repeated clearly, intentionally, as if she wanted the name to finally take up the space it had always been denied. "It's nice to meet you, Emily. I'm Claire." Something shifted in that moment. Nothing in the office changed on the surface. The desks stayed where they were. People kept arriving. The coffee remained hot in the pot. But inside her, something moved. Hearing her name spoken like that felt like being pulled back into existence. "Emily." She repeated it silently. Claire stayed for a few minutes, talking about simple things, the coffee, the weather, nothing extraordinary. But when she turned to leave, she did something no one had done in years. "See you later, Emily." Emily stood there, watching her walk down the hallway. For a brief moment, the office felt quieter and somehow lighter, as if her name had left an invisible echo behind. She went back to work. But she wasn't the same. Her steps were firmer, her posture straighter, her heart dangerously hopeful. She didn't know it yet, but a single question had just shattered years of silence. And that office would never be the same again. Emily spent the rest of the morning trying to convince herself that nothing had changed. She repeated it in her mind while mopping the floors, while emptying trash cans, while reorganizing the break room for the second time that day. Nothing changed. It was just a conversation, just a question, just her name spoken out loud. But her body refused to believe it. There was something different in the way she breathed, in the rhythm of her steps, in the way her eyes, once always lowered, now lifted without her even noticing. It was as if, after shrinking herself for so long, some part of her had forgotten how to go back to being small. She kept thinking about Claire's voice, the way she had said her name, slowly, without distraction, as if it mattered. Emily. She had never hated her name, but she had never felt like it belonged in that building. Inside those walls, names seemed reserved for people with larger desks, glass offices, titles that came with automatic respect. Her name had always felt like it existed outside, until now, By 10 o'clock the office was buzzing, keyboards clicking, phones ringing, laughter spilling out of the conference room. Emily was pushing her cleaning cart down the hallway when she heard something that made her stop. "Good morning, Emily." The voice came from behind her. She froze. For a second, she thought she had imagined it. Her heart jumped in a silent shock, the kind that makes no sound but shakes everything inside. She turned slowly. It was Claire. "Good morning," she replied, unsure, as if she was still learning how to exist under her own name in that space. Claire smiled, almost satisfied, as if confirming something important. "The coffee's really good," she said. "Thank you." "Thank you." The words felt almost too big, too heavy. Emily wasn't used to receiving them. Claire walked away, but something interesting happened. Other people had heard. Emily noticed a few quick glances, nothing obvious. Just that subtle shift in attention that happens when something breaks the pattern. Someone had said her name, out loud, in the middle of the office. For years, Emily had been too invisible to cause discomfort. Now, it was the opposite. She kept moving, trying to ignore the unfamiliar feeling in her chest. It wasn't full happiness. It wasn't fear either. It was something in between, a place she had never learned how to stand in. Later, in the break room, she was organizing the mugs when she heard two employees whispering near the door. "Have you noticed the new girl?" "Claire? Yeah, she seems nice." "Yeah, nice. Kind of strange too." "Strange how?" "I don't know. She pays too much attention, talks to everyone." Emily instinctively lowered her head. This morning she was talking to... One of them paused, searching for the right word. "The cleaning lady." The silence that followed was short, but heavy. "Yeah," the other replied. "I saw that." Heat rose to Emily's face. Not embarrassment, something closer to exposure, as if someone had pulled back a curtain without asking. She finished quickly and left before the conversation continued. Out in the hallway, she leaned against the cold wall and closed her eyes. Took a slow breath. Was this what happened when someone really saw you? When someone called you by name? Did the world become more complicated? She had always believed being invisible was the worst thing. Now she was beginning to realize that being seen required courage. Close to lunchtime, something unexpected happened. Emily was collecting trash from the conference room when the door suddenly swung open. A group rushed out, talking loudly, numbers, deadlines, decisions flying through the air. She tried to step aside quickly, but someone bumped into her cart. Papers fell. A water bottle rolled under the table. "Hey, watch it," a man said, not even looking at her. Emily immediately crouched down to pick everything up, like she always did. Before she could finish, another voice cut through the room. It wasn't her fault. She looked up. Claire was standing in the doorway. "The cart was there first," she said calmly. "You just didn't see it." The man frowned, caught off guard. It's fine," Claire interrupted gently. "It happens." Then she turned to Emily. "Are you okay?" The question was simple, but to Emily it felt like someone had turned a light on in a room that had always been dark. "I'm fine," she whispered. Claire helped gather the papers, handing them back carefully, as if defending someone invisible was the most natural thing in the world. When they stepped into the hallway, Emily's heart was beating too fast. "Thank you," she said softly. "You don't have to thank me," Claire replied. "It was the right thing to do." The right thing. Emily repeated the words silently as she returned to work. She had never considered that her own dignity could simply be right. At lunch, she did what she always did. Sat alone in the farthest corner of the break room, her container resting on her lap. She watched the other tables, conversations overlapping, laughter rising easily. She was used to that corner, but that day it felt too small. "Can I sit here?" Emily looked up, startled. Claire again. "Sure," she said after a brief hesitation. Claire sat down, opened her lunch, and began eating as if it were the most normal thing in the world. "Do you always sit here?" she asked. "Always." "Alone?" Emily shrugged. "It's easier." Claire was quiet for a moment, not an awkward silence, a thoughtful one. "You know," she said finally, "it shouldn't be like that." Emily stopped chewing. "What do you mean?" "You shouldn't be invisible here." The words moved through her slowly. They didn't hurt, but they reached somewhere too deep to ignore. "People get used to it," Emily said quietly. "And so do we." Claire held her gaze. "That doesn't make it right." A knot formed in Emily's throat. She didn't answer, because for the first time, someone was saying out loud everything she had spent years trying to justify in silence. When lunch ended, Claire stood up. "See you later, Emily." Again. The name. Always the name. Emily watched her walk away, feeling something new begin to grow inside her. It wasn't love. Not yet. It was something more fragile, more dangerous. Hope. But hope has a cost. And somewhere in that office, someone had already noticed that the silence had been broken, and not everyone was going to be happy about it. 3. Emily sensed something was different before anyone actually said a word. It wasn't a direct comment, not an obvious gesture. It was the atmosphere, a faint discomfort, almost imperceptible, drifting through the office like a cold current of air. Conversations lowered when she walked by. Some glances lingered a little too long. Others looked away too quickly. She tried to pretend she didn't notice. She moved through her routine, pushing her cart down the hallways, wiping desks, reorganizing the break room. But inside, she felt strangely exposed, as if, after years of going unnoticed, she was suddenly taking up space no one quite knew how to handle. That morning, when she stepped into the records room, she felt it again, the sensation of being watched. She turned slowly. No one was there, or almost no one. In the back of the room, near a tall shelf, a man was organizing folders. He wore a light dress shirt, sleeves rolled up to his forearms, and looked deeply focused on what he was doing. And yet, the way he glanced up, quick, careful, made it clear he had noticed her long before she turned around. "Sorry," he said, stepping slightly aside. "Didn't mean to be in the way." His voice was calm, low, nothing like the rushed tones she was used to hearing. "You're not," she replied. He nodded, saying nothing else, returning to the folders while leaving space for her to pass with the cart. Emily continued working, but her heart was beating a little faster. Not from nerves exactly, more like recognition, as if this man had been there for years, and she had never really seen him. When she finished, she pushed the cart toward the door. "Emily." She stopped, turned slowly. He was looking at her, visibly tense, as if he had rehearsed that word in silence before saying it. "Sorry," he added quickly. "I heard Claire call you that yesterday." Emily nodded, unsure how to respond. "I'm Michael," he continued. "I work in finance." She noticed the subtle relief in his expression, as if this simple exchange was something he had postponed for far too long. "Nice to meet you," she said. Michael gave a small smile, not wide, not confident, just genuine. "Nice to meet you too." The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was just new, a space neither of them quite knew how to cross yet. "Good job," he said finally. "The office feels different lately, more organized." Emily gave a small nod of thanks and left the room. It wasn't until she reached the hallway that she realized she was smiling. Not because he had said anything extraordinary, but because he had said her name without effort, without ceremony, as if it had always been that way. But it hadn't, and that made her wonder how many people like him had seen her and chosen silence. Throughout the day, small moments gathered like drops before rain. A woman said, "Excuse me," instead of brushing past her. A co-worker thanked her for the coffee. Another asked, not ordered, if she could clean a room at a different time. None of it was big enough to celebrate, but together it created something almost unsettling. Emily began to wonder, was this permanent or just temporary? Late in the afternoon, she returned to the break room and found Claire sitting at the table, scrolling on her phone. She looked up as soon as Emily walked in. "Hey," Claire said with a smile. "You okay?" Emily hesitated. "I am," she answered. "It's just different." Claire tilted her head slightly. "Different how?" Emily parked her cart against the wall and sat down for a moment. She felt the need to put the feeling into words before it disappeared. "People are noticing," she said. "Some seem uncomfortable, others confused." Claire smiled faintly. "That's normal." "Normal?" Emily repeated. "When something changes in a place that's been the same for a long time, people react," Claire said, "especially the ones who benefited from the old version." Emily stayed quiet. "You didn't do anything wrong," Claire continued. "You just started existing the way you always should have." Emily felt a knot tighten in her stomach. "Sometimes," she admitted, "it feels like I'm taking up space that isn't mine." Claire's gaze sharpened. "It is yours." The certainty in her voice made Emily look down. It was hard to accept something that had never been offered before. "And what if this ends?" Emily asked. "What if people go back to ignoring me?" Claire took a slow breath. "Even if they do," she said gently, "you're not the same anymore." The words echoed in Emily's mind for the rest of the day. You're not the same anymore. As the workday began winding down, the office grew quieter. Emily was collecting the last trash bags when she heard footsteps behind her. "Emily?" Michael again. "Hi," she said. He hesitated. "Do you need help with anything? It's getting late." She almost said no. Habit still spoke loudly. It always had. But for the first time, she paused before answering. "Actually," she said slowly, "you could help me push the cart to the storage room. It gets heavy at the end of the day." Michael smiled, visibly pleased to be useful. "Of course." They walked side by side down the hallway. They didn't talk much. They didn't need to. There was something quietly comfortable about that shared silence. When they reached the storage room, Michael held the door open for her. "Get some rest," he said. "See you tomorrow, Emily." "See you tomorrow." Emily stood still for a moment after he walked away. "See you tomorrow." No one had ever said that to her before. Not like that. When she stepped outside, the sky was already dark. She walked toward the bus stop, her body tired but her mind restless. Everything felt familiar and completely new at the same time. She thought about Claire, about Michael, about herself. Maybe this visibility was fragile. Maybe it wouldn't last. Maybe the office would try to push her back into the old corner where she had always stood. But one thing was certain. The silence had been broken. And once silence breaks, it never sounds the same again. Emily boarded the bus and sat by the window, watching the city blur past. She felt something growing inside her, not love, not yet, courage. And she was beginning to understand. Courage might be the most dangerous thing an invisible person can have. 4. Emily knew the resistance wouldn't come in the form of shouting, not direct confrontations, not open humiliation. It would come the way it always had in that building, through cold glances, quiet decisions, and small cruelties disguised as routine. That morning, something felt off before she even stepped into the break room. The mugs that were usually neatly arranged were stacked carelessly. The coffee was empty, rare because she always checked it the day before. The cleaning cloth she used for the counters wasn't where it normally was. Emily stood still for a moment, taking in the subtle disorder. None of it felt accidental. She inhaled slowly and began putting everything back in place like she always did. But inside, something tightened. This wasn't the old pain of invisibility. It was different. It felt like a test. When the office started filling up, she noticed something even stranger. People were speaking to her, but less, as if they were monitoring themselves, as if they weren't sure what distance to keep. "Good morning," she said to a woman walking by. "Morning," came the dry reply. No eye contact. Emily kept moving, pretending not to notice. But she noticed. Mid-morning, while cleaning one of the smaller meeting rooms, she heard voices outside. "Have you noticed it?" one woman asked. "I have. Ever since that new girl showed up, everything feels off. People are overdoing it. Right? Next thing you know, they'll want the cleaning lady sitting in meetings." Emily closed her eyes for a second, not because the comment was new, but because now it hurt differently. Before, remarks like that passed through her like wind. Now they hit. Because she had been seen, because she had been called by name. And losing that felt worse than never having it at all. She finished cleaning in silence and slipped out without a sound. In the hallway, she almost bumped into Michael. "Hey," he said, holding the door open. "You okay?" Emily hesitated. "I'm fine," she answered automatically. Michael didn't look convinced, but he didn't push. "If you need anything," he started. She offered a small smile, cutting him off gently. "Thank you." And she meant it. Because being noticed, even quietly, mattered. But not everyone was willing to notice. Just before lunch, Emily was called into an office for the first time in years. "Emily!" The voice came from the glass-walled office at the end of the corridor. Her stomach twisted. Susan, the administrative manager, stood in the doorway holding a folder, wearing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Can you come in for a minute?" Emily nodded and stepped inside. The room was wide, too bright. Susan gestured toward a chair, but remained standing herself, leaning casually against her desk, a position that made it very clear who controlled the conversation. "I've been receiving some feedback," Susan began, flipping through the folder without really looking at it. Emily stayed quiet. "About changes in behavior," Susan continued. "Different circulation in the hallways, extended conversations, spending time in areas outside your assigned responsibilities." Emily felt heat rise to her face. "I always move through the hallways," she said carefully. "It's part of my job." Susan looked up, assessing. "Yes, of course. But we need to maintain clear boundaries here." "Boundaries." The word landed heavy between them. "Your work is very important," Susan went on, her tone almost gentle now. "But it's essential that everyone understands their place." Their place. Emily tightened her hands in her lap. She wanted to say so many things, that she had always been there, that she had always done more than expected, that she had never crossed any line, but the words stayed locked inside her throat. Susan closed the folder. "Just a reminder," she concluded, "to avoid misunderstandings." Emily nodded. "You may return to work." When she stepped back into the hallway, it felt narrower, heavier. She walked to the break room and sat alone, staring at her lunch container with no appetite. The surrounding conversations sounded distant, like she was underwater. She had known this wouldn't be easy, but she hadn't imagined that being seen would provoke this much reaction. "Emily?" She looked up. Claire was standing there. You disappeared for a bit, Claire said. Everything okay? Emily hesitated, glanced around, then answered. I was called in by the manager. Claire's expression tightened. Why? Boundaries, Emily replied with a humorless smile. Knowing my place. Claire exhaled slowly. That was expected. Expected? Emily asked. Yes, Claire said firmly. When someone who's been invisible starts taking up space, the people who've always had everything guaranteed feel threatened. Emily felt both relief and fear at the same time. I didn't want to cause problems, she said quietly. I just wanted to exist. And for some people, Claire replied softly, that's already a problem. They sat in silence for a moment. You're not alone, Claire added, and you're not wrong. Emily swallowed. At the end of the day, as the building began to empty, she was gathering the last supplies when Susan walked past her without a word. No good night, no acknowledgement. The message was clear. But a second later, Michael appeared. Need help? He asked, nodding toward the cart. Emily paused. She thought about the warning, the boundaries, her place. Then she answered, yes. They walked together toward the storage room. The silence between them was heavy, but not uncomfortable. Some people don't like change, Michael said suddenly, especially when it exposes things that have always been wrong. Emily stopped for a second. Did you always notice, she asked, the way they treated me? Michael hesitated. Yes. The answer hurt more than she expected. Why didn't you ever say anything? He took a breath. Because it was easier to stay quiet, he admitted, and because I convinced myself it wouldn't make a difference. Emily nodded slowly. I told myself that too, she said. They stood there for a moment, the cart between them. I'm sorry, Michael said. Emily looked at him. I know. And for the first time, the apology felt real. When she left the building that night, her body was exhausted and her mind racing. She had been warned, observed, limited, but she had also been defended, called by name, chosen. As she walked toward the bus stop, a certainty began forming inside her, slow, steady, undeniable. They might try to push her back, but she would never be invisible again. 5. Emily had always believed silence was just the absence of sound. But that morning, as she watched the rain slide slowly down her apartment window, she realized something else. Silence could be full of things unsaid, of feelings suspended in the air, of decisions quietly forming, without asking permission. Something inside her had shifted since the night before. It wasn't exactly happiness. It wasn't sadness either. It was a gentle restlessness, like her heart had been brushed by possibility, and now refused to pretend nothing had happened. She made her coffee without sugar for the first time in years, not because of a diet, not because she forgot. Actually, she did forget. Her mind was somewhere else. The tone of his voice, the way he looked away when he laughed. That pause just a little too long before they said goodbye. She didn't want to admit it, but she wanted to feel that again. Her phone vibrated against the kitchen table, cutting through her thoughts. A short message. Simple. Good morning, Emily. Did you sleep well? She stared at the screen for a few seconds, as if the phone had just revealed a secret. His name there, so ordinary and yet suddenly heavy with meaning, made her stomach tighten. She typed a response, deleted it, typed another, deleted that too. Finally she sent, "Good morning. I slept..." Thinking. She left it at that, no explanation. And strangely, that felt like enough. She took a shower hotter than necessary, chose her outfit more carefully than she had in weeks. Not because she expected to see him that day, but because something inside her had woken up. On her way to work, she noticed things she usually ignored. The smell of fresh bread from the corner bakery, a child laughing too loudly at the bus stop, a couple arguing in hushed voices like the world wasn't listening. Everything felt sharper, more alive, and that scared her. For years, Emily had lived in emotional survival mode. She felt, but cautiously. She loved, but with conditions. She hoped, but always prepared for the worst. This new feeling was dangerous, because it came without armor. At work, she tried to focus. She really did. But her mind kept drifting back to the same moment, the way he had looked at her as if he was truly seeing her. Not the version she showed the world, but her. Mid-morning, Claire appeared at her office door with that familiar, curious smile. "You're different," Claire said, crossing her arms. "And different coming from you usually means interesting." Emily laughed, a nervous one. "Different how?" "Distracted, prettier than usual, and—" Claire narrowed her eyes. "Alive, what happened?" Emily hesitated. Saying it out loud would make it real. "I met someone," she said softly. Claire's eyebrows shot up. "You met someone? Or you met someone?" Emily smiled despite herself. "I don't know yet, but something happened, and I don't know what to do with it." Claire leaned against the desk. "You know that's a good thing, right?" "That's exactly what scares me," Emily admitted. "Good things don't usually last." Claire's expression softened. "Just because something ended badly before doesn't mean everything will." Emily looked away. Broken promises still echoed in her memory. Goodbyes that were never fully explained. "I don't want to lose myself again," she said quietly, "or build expectations." "You also can't hide forever," Claire replied gently. "Or one day you'll wake up and realize you spent your whole life protecting yourself and never actually living." Those words stayed with Emily long after Claire left. That evening, when she got home, there was another message waiting. "I know it's last minute, but would you have dinner with me tonight?" Her heart raced. Fear followed, like it always did, but this time something else stood beside it. Courage. She took a breath, then typed, "I'd love to." Dinner was simple. A small, cozy place. Dim lights, soft music, nothing extravagant, nothing that screamed expectations. And yet, everything felt significant. They talked for hours. About growing up in the US, about the choices that led them here, about dreams they had abandoned, and others that refused to die. Emily heard herself laugh, really laugh. She shared stories she rarely told. She felt herself relax in a way she hadn't in years. At one point, silence settled between them, but it wasn't awkward. It was full. "Can I ask you something?" he said carefully. "Sure. Why do you always seem ready to leave, even when you're staying?" The question hit her defenses without warning. She took her time answering. "Because staying once cost me more than I was ready to pay," she said finally, "so I learned to leave before it hurts again." He nodded, like he understood more than she expected. "I can't promise it won't hurt," he said honestly, "but I can promise I won't pretend. No empty vows, no guarantees, just truth, and for the first time in a long time, that felt like enough." When they said goodbye, there was no kiss, just a hug that lasted too long to be casual, and too short to be everything it could have been. On her way home, Emily realized something important. She wasn't running anymore. She was still afraid, still uncertain, but for the first time, she was allowing something new in. And sometimes that's exactly how the most dangerous and the most beautiful stories begin. Emily woke up with the uncomfortable feeling that something wasn't right. It wasn't a clear nightmare, not even a specific thought, just a strange weight in her chest, like her heart had sensed something before her mind could catch up. She lay there for a few minutes, staring at the ceiling, listening to her own breathing, trying to name the unrest. Her phone was silent, and for some reason, that disappointed her. She got up slowly, made her coffee, and sat at the table without turning on the TV or playing music. The silence that morning felt different. It wasn't peaceful. It was waiting. The night before had been too good. Good in the kind of way that leaves marks, conversations that felt old and familiar, laughter that came easily, glances that said more than words ever could. Nothing had been promised. And yet everything felt full of possibility, and Emily knew possibilities were dangerous. At work, she tried to focus. She failed miserably. She opened the same file 3 times and couldn't remember what she was supposed to do. That's when her phone vibrated. A message, but it wasn't from him. The name on the screen made her stomach twist. Michael, her entire body tensed, like someone had opened a door she had kept locked for years. The past, that inconvenient visitor, had found her address again. She didn't open the message right away. She just stared at the screen, thumb frozen, heart racing. Claire noticed immediately. "Emily," she said softly, stepping closer. "What is it?" Emily looked up, pale. "He reached out." Claire didn't ask who. "Are you going to answer?" Emily swallowed. "I don't know." But the past rarely waits for mature decisions. Minutes later, her phone rang. She answered almost on reflex. "Emily?" His voice sounded too familiar, like an old song you swear you've forgotten, but somehow still know every word to. She closed her eyes for a second. "What do you want, Michael?" A pause. "I'm in Berlin." The floor seemed to disappear beneath her. "What?" "I got here yesterday and I needed to see you." Anger, confusion, an old, familiar fear spreading through her chest. "After all this time?" Her voice was controlled, low. "You just show up?" "I know I don't have the right," he said, "but I need to explain." Explain. The word felt almost insulting. "There is no explanation for what you did," Emily replied, her eyes burning. "You left. You disappeared. You left me with questions that never had answers." "I made a mistake," he said, "and it cost me everything." She took a deep breath, fighting the pull of a hole she knew too well. "I can't do this right now," she said firmly. "I can't see you, Emily. Please." She hung up, stood there for a few seconds, phone still in her hand, heart pounding unevenly. Claire wrapped her arms around her without saying a word. Sometimes words only get in the way. "He can't mess everything up again," Emily whispered. "I won't let him." But deep down, she knew he already had. That same night, another message appeared, this time from the new beginning. "Tonight was incredible. I'm still smiling." Emily stared at the screen, a knot tightening in her chest. She wanted to respond with the same lightness, wanted to pretend nothing had happened, wanted to stay inside that safe space that was just starting to form between them. But there was something he needed to know. They met at the same cafe as before. The atmosphere hadn't changed, but Emily had. More guarded, more distant. He noticed immediately. "Did something happen?" he asked gently. Part of her wanted to run. Another part knew that if she wanted this to be different, she had to be honest. "Someone from my past reached out today," she said. He didn't react with jealousy, just attention. "Someone important?" She nodded. "Someone who hurt me deeply." The silence between them grew heavy. "Does that change anything?" he asked, no accusation in his voice. Emily inhaled slowly. "I don't know yet, but it scares me how much it shook me." He leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. "You don't owe me explanations," he said, "but I do need to know where I'm standing." She met his eyes. "I don't want to play with you," she said honestly, "but I also don't want to pretend my past doesn't exist." He stayed quiet for a few seconds, organizing his thoughts. "I have ghosts too," he said finally. "I just don't let them decide my future." The words weren't harsh, they were true. And somehow that hurt more. Emily felt that old instinct rise again, to shut down, to retreat, to leave before she cared too much. "Maybe I need some time," she whispered. He nodded, even though it clearly wasn't what he wanted to hear. "I'll wait," he said. "Just don't disappear." The sentence pierced her chest like an arrow, because that was exactly what Michael had done to her years ago. When she got home that night, she cried, not loudly, not dramatically, but the quiet, deep kind, the kind that comes when too many emotions pile up at once. She wasn't just crying for the past, she was crying for the fear of losing something that had barely begun. The next morning, there was another message from Michael. Longer, more desperate. He wanted to see her, to explain everything, to have one chance. Emily felt the conflict growing inside her. On one side, old pain, barely healed. On the other, something new, fragile, but real. And then she realized something. The choice wasn't about two men. It was about who she wanted to be now. The woman still trapped by what was, or the woman brave enough to choose what could be. And that decision was closer than she thought. Emily spent the entire day trying to outrun a decision she knew was inevitable. She ignored Michael's third message, then the fourth. She tried to convince herself that silence was an answer. But the past doesn't work like that. It always finds a crack. At work, everything felt louder than usual. Keyboards clicking, distant conversations, the elevator rising and falling. She moved through her tasks like she was watching herself from the outside, while inside, a storm was building. Claire noticed. "You're not going to be able to pretend much longer," she said as they walked toward the exit together. Emily sighed. "I know." "Are you going to see him?" A pause. "Tonight." Claire stopped walking and looked at her carefully. "Not because he asked," Emily added quickly, "because I need to close this. For real." Claire nodded. "Then go as the woman who knows she's not the same girl he left behind." Those words echoed in Emily's mind the entire way home. She got ready carefully, not out of vanity, but out of respect for who she had become. Simple, elegant, grounded. She tied her hair back the way she did when she needed to feel steady. She stood in front of the mirror for a long moment. "You're not that girl anymore," she whispered to her reflection. The cafe Michael chose was small and discreet, exactly his style. She saw him immediately. He was sitting by the window, fingers intertwined, restless. Michael had changed, older, a little more worn, but there was something still the same. That quiet confidence of someone who once believed he could leave and come back whenever he wanted. He stood as soon as he saw her. "Emily," he said, like her name itself was an apology. She sat down without smiling. "You have 30 minutes. He swallowed. "I deserve that." The silence at first was heavy. It's strange, sitting across from someone who once felt like home, and then became abandonment. "Why now?" Emily asked directly. "After years." Michael exhaled slowly. "Because I never really moved on," he admitted. "Because everything fell apart after I left. Because I realized too late what I lost. Something shifted inside her, not joy, not hope, exhaustion. You realized late," she said calmly, "and I paid early." He lowered his gaze. "I was scared," he confessed. "Scared I wouldn't be enough. Scared I'd fail. Leaving felt easier than staying and trying. So you chose the comfortable path," Emily replied, "and left the hard part to me." He nodded, defeated. "I know I can't undo what I did," he said. "But I needed you to know it wasn't because I didn't love you." Her eyes burned, but she didn't let the tears fall. "Love isn't just a feeling," she said. "It's choosing to stay. every day. She took a breath. I spent years trying to figure out what was wrong with me. Years thinking if I had been different, you would have stayed. Her voice faltered, just slightly. Now I know there was never anything wrong with me. Michael looked up, regret written all over his face. You're different, he murmured. I am, she said, and that didn't happen because of you. It happened despite you. Silence. He seemed to understand finally that this wasn't a negotiation. Are you seeing someone? He asked softly. She hesitated, thought about him, the patience, the quiet steadiness, the way he looked at her like she was whole, not a risk to manage. I'm getting to know someone, she answered honestly. Michael's expression shifted. And do you like him? She took her time. I like who I am when I'm with him. Michael nodded slowly. Then I came too late. She looked out the window before answering. At strangers moving through their lives, unaware that something inside that cafe was ending. You came, she said finally, but not too late for me to choose differently. A sad smile crossed his face. I wish I had been man enough back then. So did I, Emily replied, but I don't need that anymore. She stood, paused for just a second. I hope you're okay, Michael, truly. And then she walked away. Outside, the cold night air hit her all at once. Her chest felt heavy and strangely light. She had done something she had never managed to do before. She had chosen herself. Her phone vibrated. A message. You home? She recognized the number instantly. She smiled. Not yet. A few seconds passed. Want company? Emily stopped in the middle of the sidewalk. Her heart beat faster, but not from fear, from anticipation. Yes, they met at the same simple, almost improvised spot as before. The moment he saw her, he knew something had shifted. You okay? He asked. She inhaled deeply. I'm different, she told him. Not every detail, but enough. He listened without interrupting, without judging, without trying to be the hero. When she finished, he stayed quiet for a moment. Thank you for trusting me, he said. She looked at him. I was afraid you'd pull away. A small smile. I told you I'd wait. I didn't say I'd run. Something inside her settled. They walked side by side. No kiss, no promises, just presence. And for the first time in a long time, Emily didn't see the future as something threatening. It felt like open space, waiting for her. 8. That morning, Emily had the strange feeling the office was watching her. Not paranoia, something almost physical, like the air had thickened, like each step echoed louder than it should. She walked in, gripping her bag a little tighter, took a steady breath before scanning her badge, and headed down the long hallway toward her department. For years, that walk had been automatic, invisible. She moved through the building unnoticed, uninterrupted, unremarkable. But not that morning. Morning, Emily. The voice came from her right. She paused, startled. It was someone from legal, a man who had worked there at least 5 years and had never, not once, said her name. Good morning, she replied politely, her pulse quickening. He smiled in a strange way, like someone trying on a new personality. I saw your report last week. Really strong work. She nodded, thanked him, but inside, something twisted. It wasn't pride. It was exposure. As if she had stepped out of a safe shadow and into a spotlight she hadn't agreed to stand in. When she reached her desk, she noticed it again, glances that lingered half a second too long, conversations that paused just slightly when she walked by. Nothing obvious, nothing you could point to, but everything said the same thing. Something has shifted. Claire approached with a coffee in hand. They're seeing you, she murmured. Emily offered a small smile. I think they are. And that scares people, Claire replied. Before Emily could answer, a voice cut clean through the room. Emily, my office now. Margaret, her supervisor. Emily's heartbeat jumped, but she stood without hesitation. She walked toward the glass office at the end of the hall, acutely aware of eyes following her. Margaret's office was immaculate. No personal photos, no plants, no clutter, everything in its place. Sit, Margaret said evenly. Emily did. Margaret folded her hands on the desk and studied her for a few seconds too long. I've noticed a recent change in your behavior, she began. More participation, more presence, more visibility. Emily held her gaze. I've been contributing more. Margaret tilted her head slightly. Contributions are welcome, as long as they don't disrupt team balance. Balance? Emily asked, feeling something ignite quietly inside her. Some people function best when they know exactly where they belong, Margaret replied smoothly. When they don't attempt to occupy spaces that were never theirs. Silence fell heavy between them. Emily inhaled slowly. For years, she said calmly, I occupied far too little space. I don't see the problem in adjusting that. Margaret's expression cooled. Sudden shifts often create resistance, she warned, and resistance comes with consequences. Emily stood. I'll accept the consequences. When she stepped back into the hallway, her hands were trembling. Claire was on her feet instantly. She tried to intimidate you, didn't she? Emily nodded. She reminded me this place doesn't like change. Claire gave a half smile. Then you're doing something right. But the afternoon didn't soften. An email went unanswered. A document was quietly removed from an agenda. A meeting was scheduled without her, even though she was central to the project, none of it dramatic on its own. Together, it formed a pattern. At lunch, Emily sat alone, the way she always had. The cafeteria buzzed with laughter and easy conversations. For years, she had watched it all from a distance. Then a shadow fell across her table. Mind if I sit? She looked up. It was him. Of course, she said. He sat down as if it were the most natural thing in the world. They're talking about you, he said plainly. Her stomach tightened. Good or bad? Depends who you ask, he replied. To some you're inspiring. To others, you're a threat. She let out a nervous laugh. I never thought being noticed would be this complicated. He studied her carefully. Systems built on silence don't respond well when someone finds their voice. Across the cafeteria, Margaret was watching. Emily felt it before she fully saw it. That steady, calculating stare. She wasn't invisible anymore, and that came with a price. Late that afternoon, an email arrived just before closing time. Subject, internal restructuring, position review. Her heart pounded as she opened it. Her name appeared highlighted. Her entire body went cold. She couldn't tell if this was an opportunity or an elegant way to quiet her again. When she stepped outside, the sky was grey and the wind cut sharply against her face. She walked a few steps, then stopped to breathe. Being seen was terrifying, but going back to invisible, unthinkable. Her phone vibrated. You were quiet today. Everything okay? She smiled faintly. Not sure yet, but I'm trying to be. The reply came almost immediately. If you need to fight something, you don't have to fight alone. She slipped her phone back into her bag and kept walking. She didn't know what the restructuring meant. She didn't know who was against her. She didn't know how hard this next part would be. But she knew one thing with absolute certainty. She would never disappear again. 9. The email stayed with Emily all night. She tried to sleep. But every time she closed her eyes, the same word flashed cold and impersonal in her mind. Restructuring. She knew what that meant. It wasn't about efficiency. It wasn't about improvement. It was about power, about control, about putting people back in their place, and she had dared to step out of hers. The next morning, she arrived earlier than usual. The building was quiet, nearly empty, a kind of silence that didn't judge, the kind that simply existed. She sat at her desk and opened the email again, reading each line carefully. Position review, redistribution of responsibilities, possible reassignments. Nothing explicitly said she was at risk, but everything implied it. "Did you get it too?" Claire asked, appearing beside her with 2 coffees. Emily nodded. "I did." Claire sat on the edge of the desk. "This isn't normal," she said quietly. "This restructuring wasn't scheduled until next semester." A chill ran down Emily's spine. "So it's not a coincidence," she murmured. Claire exhaled slowly. "You became a problem." Emily let out a dry half laugh. "Funny. I spent years being ignored. Now I'm a problem." The office gradually filled. Greetings, small talk, forced normalcy. But the air felt different. People whispered when she passed. Others avoided eye contact. It was as if her presence now required a decision. Mid-morning, Margaret called an emergency meeting. Everyone seated, everyone alert. Margaret stood at the front, immaculate as always, clicking through sterile slides. "As you all know," she began, "the company is undergoing an internal optimization process." Emily's pulse quickened. "Some roles will be reviewed, others reallocated. This should not be viewed negatively, but as an opportunity for growth." Emily almost smiled. "Growth for whom?" "However," Margaret continued, "it's important to recognize that not all profiles align with the new direction." Her gaze flickered briefly toward Emily. Brief, but precise. "Each employee will be evaluated individually. Some of you will be called in for private discussions later today." When the meeting ended, the room felt heavy. No one wanted to be next. "She did that to expose you," Claire whispered. "She wants me to back down," Emily replied. "Will you?" Emily looked at her desk, at the stacks of work, at the years of silence layered there. "No," she said, "not now." Just before lunch, the email arrived. Subject, meeting, 2:00 p.m., Margaret's office. Her stomach twisted. "Want me to walk you there?" Claire asked. "No," Emily said softly, "but thank you." She stood, straightened her posture, and walked toward the glass office. Margaret gestured to the chair. "Emily," she began with a smile that was too polished. "I'll be direct." Emily nodded. "Your role is being re-evaluated." "Why?" Emily asked, steady. Margaret folded her hands. "Your profile has shifted. You've displayed behaviors that fall outside expectations for your position." "Like participating more?" Emily countered. "Or contributing ideas?" "Like drawing unnecessary attention," Margaret corrected. Something burned in Emily's chest. "I deliver results," she said. "My reports improved performance. The numbers show that." Margaret tilted her head slightly. "Results aren't everything. Harmony matters." "Harmony," Emily replied evenly, "or obedience?" Silence fell like a dropped weight. "Careful," Margaret said softly. "Replaceable people tend to forget how easily they can be replaced." Emily stood. "For a long time I believed that," she said. "Not anymore." Margaret's eyes hardened. "We're considering relocating you to a department with less exposure, less responsibility, less interference." The blow landed. "That's a punishment." "It's a strategic decision," Margaret replied. "Take some time before you respond." Emily walked out on unsteady legs. He was there in the hallway, waiting. "I saw you go in," he said. "Are you okay?" She tried to answer, but her voice failed. She just shook her head. He didn't press. He simply placed a gentle hand on her arm. "Let's step outside," he said. "You need air." They walked out of the building. Cold wind hit her face, and with it the tears she could no longer hold back. "I did everything right," she said between breaths. And still the system reacted," he finished. "Systems don't like people who think." She looked at him. "I'm scared," she admitted, "scared of losing everything." "You won't lose who you are," he said quietly, "and that's the hardest thing to take from someone." She inhaled deeply. "They want to shrink me," she said. "Put me back in a smaller place." "Then don't go back," he replied without hesitation. She stared at him. "And if it costs me my job?" He held her gaze. "Sometimes staying costs more." That sentence rooted itself inside her. That night, alone at home, she opened her laptop and reviewed everything she had built over the past months. Reports, ideas, proposals that had been quietly ignored, and she saw it clearly. They never had a problem with the quality of her work. The problem was her voice. Emily closed the laptop. Maybe this wasn't just a professional test. Maybe it was a life decision. Accept being reduced or risk everything to remain whole. And for the first time, in the middle of the fear, something new was rising. Courage. 10. Emily didn't sleep that night. Not the kind of insomnia that comes and goes. This was different. It was alertness, as if her body knew something important was about to happen and refused to shut down. She lay there staring at the dark ceiling, thoughts rising and falling like waves that couldn't find shore. Margaret's voice, the cold look in her eyes, the word relocation, said so casually. It all kept circling. For years, Emily believed survival meant adaptation. Stay small, don't disrupt, don't demand, don't take up space. But something had shifted, and now going back felt more painful than stepping into the unknown. When the alarm went off, she was already awake. She moved slowly, like someone preparing for a quiet battle. Showered, dressed carefully, chose neutral clothes, not to disappear, but to remind herself she didn't need to prove anything through appearance. Before leaving, she stopped in front of the mirror. "You're not too much," she whispered. "You're whole." The walk to the office felt longer that morning. Every step carried a decision she hadn't spoken out loud yet, but it was already alive inside her. The moment she walked into the building, she felt it. The looks, some curious, some uncomfortable, some openly hostile. She didn't lower her head. Claire was waiting at her desk, arms crossed, worry written across her face. "You disappeared yesterday," Claire said. "I was worried." Emily set her bag down and took a deep breath. "I had to decide whether I was going to keep living the old way or accept the consequences of changing." Claire studied her. "And?" Emily nodded once. "I'm not accepting the relocation, not quietly, not politely." Claire exhaled slowly. "Then you know what that could mean." "I do," Emily said. "It could cost me my job. Or it could change everything," Claire replied. Emily sat down and opened her laptop. Before touching any of her regular tasks, she wrote a short, direct, professional email requesting a formal meeting with HR to discuss her evaluation and the proposed restructuring. When she hit send, her heart pounded. It was official. She wasn't reacting anymore. She was positioning herself. The response came in less than an hour. Meetings scheduled for late afternoon, Margaret included. Emily closed her eyes briefly. The day dragged under a heavy atmosphere. The office felt like it was holding its breath. Whispers followed her. Some colleagues avoided eye contact. Others watched her as if she were a silent spectacle. Margaret walked past her desk twice, said nothing, but her expression made one thing clear. She knew exactly what Emily was doing. Early afternoon, he approached her desk. "I heard about the meeting," he said quietly. "News travels fast," Emily replied. "When someone breaks a pattern, people notice," he said. She tried to smile. It didn't quite work. "I'm not afraid to speak," she admitted softly. "I'm afraid of what comes after." He leaned slightly closer. "Fear doesn't mean you're wrong," he said. "It means you're leaving a place that didn't fit anymore." At exactly 5 o'clock, Emily stood. The walk to HR felt louder than it should have. The long hallway, the bright walls, the glass room. Inside, 2 HR analysts were already seated. Margaret sat perfectly composed, posture flawless, expression neutral. "Emily," one of them began, "we understand you requested this meeting to discuss your position in light of the restructuring." "Yes," Emily said, sitting down. Margaret crossed her arms. "I must admit I'm surprised," she said. "I believed our previous conversation was sufficient." Emily inhaled slowly. "That's exactly why I asked for this meeting." She opened the folder she brought with her. Inside weren't empty accusations. There were numbers, records, evidence. "In the past few months," Emily began, "my productivity increased. I delivered projects ahead of schedule. I proposed improvements that reduced rework. None of these contributions were formally acknowledged." She slid the documents across the table. "The proposed restructuring," she continued, "does not appear to be based on performance, but on discomfort caused by my change in posture." Margaret gave a restrained smile. "That's a subjective interpretation." Emily held her gaze. "Then I request that it be formally noted that I am being reassigned without prior warnings, without negative performance reviews, and without clear technical justification." Silence. Complete. One of the HR analysts cleared her throat softly. "We can document your statement." Margaret leaned forward. "Emily, corporate environments operate on balance," she said quietly. "Not every battle needs to be fought." Emily felt her heartbeat in her chest. But she didn't look away. "For me, this one does," she replied. "Because this isn't just about a title, it's about being treated with respect." Margaret stood. "You're creating unnecessary conflict." Emily stood too. "The conflict was already there," she said. "I just stopped pretending it wasn't." The meeting ended without a final decision. HR requested time to review. When Emily stepped out, her legs felt weak. Claire was waiting. She hugged her without saying a word. "You were brave," Claire said eventually. "I was shaking the entire time," Emily admitted with a faint smile. "Courage isn't not shaking," Claire replied. "It's not stepping back." Outside, the sky was darkening. He was there, waiting. "How did it go?" he asked. Emily let out a long breath. "I don't know how this ends." He gently took her hand. "But you spoke," he said, "and no one can take that from you." She looked back at the building. For years, it had felt bigger than her. Now it looked like what it was, just a building. That night, at home, Emily opened her laptop and reviewed everything she had created over the years. Ignored ideas, archived reports, forgotten suggestions, and she understood with almost painful clarity. It was never about competence, it was always about silence. Before going to bed, a short email arrived. Subject, review in progress. Nothing else. No reassurance, no explicit threat, just waiting. Emily closed the laptop and lay down in the dark, her heart still racing, but steady. Maybe she would lose the job, maybe she would lose the security, but she would never lose herself again, and that was irreversible. 11. Emily sensed something had changed before she could even name it. There wasn't a specific event, no unexpected message, no dramatic revelation. It was something smaller, the way silence began to follow her. Not the heavy silence of loss, not the sharp emptiness of the first days. This was different. It was a silence that observed, that waited. She was sitting on a wooden bench near the River Spree, wrapped in the same grey coat she'd been wearing since she arrived in Berlin. Winter hadn't fully let go yet, but the air carried something new. Maybe the promise of spring or maybe just change. Emily closed her eyes and inhaled slowly. It still hurt to think about Thomas. The pain hadn't disappeared. It had simply moved. Before, it lived in her chest, constant, crushing. Now it came in waves, sometimes soft, almost nostalgic. Other times brutal, like a memory that doesn't knock before tearing through you. She thought of him when she saw couples laughing in small cafes, when she smelled fresh bread in the morning, when she heard someone speaking English with an American accent on the subway. But there was something new. Between one memory and the next, there were gaps, and inside those gaps, there was no guilt. That realization startled her. For a long time, feeling anything other than sadness felt like betrayal, as if smiling meant erasing what they had, as if moving forward meant denying the love had ever been real. But sitting there, watching the dark river reflect the cloudy sky, she understood something simple and devastating. The love she had lived didn't need to be protected by pain. She slipped her hand into her coat pocket and touched her phone. No new messages. Still, the gesture was automatic, a habit from a version of herself who was always waiting to be chosen again. Emily exhaled softly. "You're learning," she murmured to herself. Across the city, Daniel stared at his coffee cup as if it might answer the questions he avoided asking. His apartment was too quiet that Saturday morning. He had turned down a colleague's invitation the night before, offering some vague excuse. It wasn't exhaustion, it was confusion. He was thinking about Emily more often than he was comfortable admitting, not in an overwhelming way, not charged with desire or expectation. It was subtler than that, more dangerous. She showed up in details, in a song playing at a cafe, in the way sunlight filtered through a window, in the strange, quiet smile he caught himself wearing for no clear reason. He didn't want to admit it, not even to himself, but something felt different. He had dated other women since moving to Germany, quick conversations, casual dinners, connections that never asked for depth. It was comfortable, safe. Emily wasn't safe. She carried too much silence in her eyes, too much history in her gestures, and a kind of softness that didn't offer itself. It had to be noticed. That unsettled him. Daniel ran a hand through his hair and stood, pacing his apartment as if he could outrun his own thoughts. He stopped at the window and watched people moving below, each carrying invisible worlds of their own. He wondered if Emily walked like that too, pretending normalcy while something inside her quietly reorganized. His phone buzzed on the table. For a second, he hesitated before looking. It was her. "Hey, I know this is last minute, but would you want to take a walk today? The day feels strange. I thought you might understand." Daniel smiled. A small one. Unplanned. He did understand. "Of course, tell me where." They met near an old bridge, the kind of place that feels like it has witnessed more stories than it could ever tell. The sky remained grey, but the light felt undecided, as if the day wasn't sure whether to rain or open up. Emily arrived first. Daniel recognized her from a distance. She looked different, not physically, something deeper. The way she stood upright despite the cold wind, the way her gaze felt present. There was no rush in her. "Hey," she said as he approached. "Hey," Daniel replied, feeling that familiar, quiet comfort that always surfaced when they were together. They started walking side by side, not touching. The silence between them wasn't awkward. It never was. It breathed. "I almost didn't come," Emily admitted after a few minutes. "I thought maybe I was confusing things." Daniel glanced at her. "Are you?" She considered that. "I don't know, but for the first time in a long time, that doesn't scare me as much." He nodded slowly. "I think we're in the same place." She smiled, light, honest. "Do you ever feel like you're relearning how to exist?" He let out a quiet laugh, surprised. Every day. They stopped at the center of the bridge. The river flowed beneath them, constant, indifferent to human heartbreak. Emily rested her arms on the railing and watched the water move. "I used to think loving someone once meant I couldn't love again," she said, her voice nearly carried off by the wind, "or that if I did, everything before would lose its meaning." Daniel stayed quiet, letting her unfold at her own pace. "But now," she continued, "I think love doesn't disappear, it just changes shape, and that doesn't diminish anything." Something tightened in his chest. Not fear, recognition. "Maybe that's why it hurts less when we accept it," he said. "Because we're not trying to erase anything." She turned toward him. Her eyes met his, soft, steady, without demand. "Daniel," she began, then paused. He waited. "I don't know what this is. I don't know if it's friendship or something that could become more. I just know that I feel safe here, with you." He took a slow breath. Her words settled inside him gently, but they carried weight. "I don't know either," he said honestly, "but I don't want to rush anything. I don't want to use you as an escape, and I don't want to be one." Emily nodded, relief flickering across her face. "Me neither." They stayed there a little longer, just feeling the wind, the cold, the moment. There was no kiss, no promise, but something was being built, brick by brick, in silence. When they finally said goodbye, Emily walked home with lighter steps than she'd had in weeks. She still thought about Thomas, still missed him, still carried scars. But now, between those aches, there was space. Space for curiosity, space for presence, space for something new, not as a replacement, but as continuation. Across the city, Daniel closed his apartment door and leaned against it for a moment, eyes closed. He smiled to himself, not because he was in love, but because for the first time in a long time, something inside him was waking up. And that was how everything begins. 12. Emily woke up with the strange feeling that she had been dreaming while awake. The room was still wrapped in Berlin's early morning dimness, but something inside her had already been up for hours. She lay there for a while, staring at the ceiling, listening to the distant sound of the city beginning to exist. A tram passing, footsteps moving quickly along the sidewalk, the world continuing, as it always does. Almost without thinking, she placed a hand over her chest. There was no pain there, but there wasn't euphoria either. There was anticipation, and that made her nervous. Emily sat up, running her fingers through her messy hair. Anticipation was dangerous. It always had been. That's how disappointment starts, quietly, beautifully, promising more than it can deliver. She had promised herself she wouldn't create stories too soon, wouldn't name feelings still forming, wouldn't compare, and yet Daniel was there in her thoughts, in the memory of the cold wind on the bridge, in the way he never rushed to fill silence with empty words. He hadn't asked anything of her, and maybe that was exactly what made it confusing. She moved to the kitchen and made coffee. The familiar smell grounded her. Simple things still worked. That mattered. She wrapped both hands around the warm mug and leaned against the counter, letting her thoughts move freely. She wasn't in love, not yet, but she wasn't empty anymore. Across the city, Daniel was getting ready to leave his apartment without knowing exactly why. He had spent the morning attempting small, ordinary tasks, answering emails, organizing papers, washing the dishes stacked in the sink. Everything required more effort than it should have, as if his mind were a few steps ahead of his body. He couldn't remember the last time someone had entered his thoughts this quietly, without urgency, without pressure, without drama. Emily didn't pull at him, she drew him in, and that put him on alert. Over the years, Daniel had learned to recognize emotional danger signs, the cold in his stomach, the urge to over-explain, the instinct to create distance before something could take root. But with Emily, what he felt wasn't escape. It was care. He grabbed his coat and stepped outside, walking without a clear destination. Berlin had a way of inviting introspection, even in the middle of constant movement. He crossed familiar streets, glanced at storefronts, listened to different languages blending in the air. He thought about calling her. He didn't. Respecting timing felt more important than satisfying his own anxiety. Emily spent the day keeping herself busy. She went to the market, organized old things, opened boxes that still carried pieces of the life she left behind, photographs, letters, objects that once hurt too much to even touch. She let herself look. Thomas still existed there, in the frozen smile in photographs, in the familiar handwriting in letters, in the love that had been real, intense, transformative. She felt the ache of missing him, but not despair. Something inside her had finally settled into the past. Not erased, not forgotten, just placed somewhere respectful. Mid-afternoon, her phone buzzed. A message from Daniel. "Walked past a bookstore today and thought of you. I know that sounds random, but I figured you'd want to know." Emily smiled, not because it was grand, but because it was simple, honest, no hidden intention. "I like random things. Thanks for telling me." A few minutes passed before he replied. "Want to go there with me sometime? No pressure." She stared at the screen a little longer than necessary. No pressure. The words landed in the best possible way. An invitation without demand, a gesture without a trap. "I'd like that." They made plans for the next day. Nothing more was said. And still, Emily felt her heartbeat just a little faster. That night, she stood by the window, watching the city lights flicker on. She thought about how strange it was, how the most important things rarely arrive announced. They slip quietly into routine until one day you realize something has shifted. She wasn't falling in love, but she was opening. Daniel, meanwhile, felt restless in a way that wasn't unpleasant, just intensely aware. He wondered if he was ready, if he knew how to hold someone who carried history, if he might ruin something by trying too hard to be careful. He knew Emily came from a deep loss, and maybe he did too. Not every loss is recent. Some are older, deeper, leaving silent marks. Daniel closed his eyes and took a slow breath. There was no promise here, just presence. And for now, that felt like enough. The next day, when they met at the small, cozy bookstore, the air between them felt different, not tense, curious. They wandered through the shelves, commenting on covers, exchanging thoughts, laughing over literary coincidences. At one point, Emily picked up a book and handed it to him. "This one saved me once," she said. Daniel took it carefully, as if receiving something fragile. "Then it must be important." "It was," she replied softly. "It still is." Their fingers brushed, lingering just a second longer than necessary. No spark, no rush to pull away, just natural. Daniel looked at her. Emily held his gaze. Something unspoken passed between them, not a promise, but recognition. They didn't kiss, not yet. But as they stepped back out into the cool Berlin air, walking side by side, Daniel realized he was smiling without meaning to. And Emily felt, for the first time in a long while, that she didn't need to guard herself against this growing feeling. Maybe love wouldn't arrive like a storm this time. Maybe it would come like this, steady, attentive, patient. And if it did, she was beginning to think she might let it in. 13. Emily sensed something had shifted before she could even name it. It wasn't a specific gesture, not a misplaced word. It was the way the day seemed aware of her, as if every detail had been slightly amplified. The sound of footsteps on the sidewalk, the cold wind brushing her face, the strange thread of anticipation that had followed her since the bookstore. She tried to ignore it. It worked for a few hours. At the office, everything moved in a fragile balance. After the meeting with HR, the looks had changed. Some curious, others cautious. Margaret still hadn't spoken to her directly, but Emily felt her presence like a shadow stretching across the room. Claire noticed. "You're different," she said, leaning against the edge of Emily's desk. "Different how?" "More whole," Claire replied. "And that makes people uncomfortable when they preferred you smaller." Emily gave a faint smile. "I'm still scared." "Of course you are," Claire said. "But now you're not just scared." Emily didn't answer, because she knew exactly what Claire meant. Daniel. That afternoon, he sent a simple message. "Want to take a walk after work?" Emily hesitated for only a second. "Yes." They met near the canal, where the city always seemed to slow down. The lights were beginning to flicker on, reflecting over the dark water. Daniel walked beside her, hands tucked into his coat pockets. "You look tired," he said. "I am," she replied, "but not in a bad way." He nodded, like he understood completely. They walked in silence for a while. Not an awkward silence, a full one, alive, saying things words couldn't quite carry. Emily stopped by the railing and rested her arms against it, watching the trembling reflection of lights in the water. "Sometimes I feel like I'm always one step away from losing something," she said without looking at him. Daniel moved a little closer. "What do you think you might lose now?" She took her time answering. "The courage I found," she finally said. "I'm afraid it's just a moment, that I'll wake up tomorrow and everything will shrink again." He was quiet for a few seconds. "Courage isn't something you lose," he said softly. "It just changes shape." Emily turned toward him. There was something in Daniel's eyes that disarmed her. Not promise, not pressure, presence. "You talk like someone who's lost a lot," she said. He took a slow breath. "I have," he admitted, "but I've learned that some losses are just changes that take time to make sense." The wind grew colder. Emily shivered slightly. Without hesitation, Daniel removed his scarf and draped it over her shoulders, carefully, almost reverently. "Better?" he asked. "Yes," she said, her chest tightening. They were very close now, too close not to notice. Emily felt the warmth of him against the night air, the steady rhythm of his breathing. The world around them seemed to lower its volume. Daniel lifted his hand slowly, not assuming, almost asking, and gently touched her face. Just a touch, simple. Emily didn't pull away. For one endless second, all that existed was the space between them. The almost. She closed her eyes, and then her phone vibrated. The sound was too loud, too real. Her eyes flew open. Daniel stepped back immediately, respectful, but the moment had already fractured. Emily looked at the screen, a notification she never expected to see again. Thomas. Her throat tightened. "Everything okay?" Daniel asked, noticing the shift in her expression. Emily swallowed. "It's someone from my past," she said quickly, slipping the phone back into her pocket. Daniel nodded, but something in his gaze changed. Not jealousy, caution. "Do you want to go?" he asked. She took a deep breath. "No, I just need a minute." She stepped a few paces away, her heart racing. The memories came like a wave. The love, the loss, the pain that nearly broke her. And now that message, short, almost cruel in its simplicity. "I heard you're in Berlin. Can we talk?" Her hands trembled. She didn't respond. Not yet. Daniel watched from a distance, careful not to intrude. He knew what it looked like when someone was fighting a silent battle. When Emily returned, her expression was more guarded. "I'm sorry," she said. "That wasn't fair to you." "You don't have to apologize," Daniel replied gently. "The past doesn't ask permission." She gave a weak smile. "Sometimes it feels like it's waiting around the corner." He looked at her seriously. You don't have to cross that street alone. Her eyes burned. I know, she said, but I still need to decide if I want to cross it at all. They walked back in silence, a different silence now, heavier, loaded with everything unsaid. Before they parted, Daniel stopped in front of her. Emily, he began, I like being with you, but I don't want to be a distraction while you're trying to resolve something that still hurts. She held his gaze, gratitude and sadness mixing in her chest. You're not a distraction, she said softly. You're a risk. Daniel's mouth curved into a small smile. Then maybe you're worth taking one too. They didn't kiss. Again. But when they stepped away from each other, Emily knew something invisible had been crossed. A threshold, a door left slightly open. That night, she sat in the dark, staring at her phone. Thomas's message still glowing on the screen. She typed a response, deleted it, typed again. Finally, she wrote, maybe, but not now. Her heart pounded as she hit send. Across the city, Daniel lay awake, staring at the ceiling, thinking about how some people enter our lives not to save us, but to remind us who we could become. And in that almost kiss that never happened, they both knew whatever came next wouldn't be simple, but it would be real. 14. Emily didn't sleep that night. Her phone rested on the nightstand like something alive, pulsing with possibilities she wasn't ready to face. The message she had sent Thomas echoed inside her. Maybe, but not now. It wasn't a yes, it wasn't a no. It was a door left slightly open, and that unsettled her more than she wanted to admit. She got up before her alarm, body exhausted, mind wide awake. She made coffee without smelling it, took a few sips without tasting it. Every part of her felt somewhere else, in the past. On the way to work, she studied her reflection in the tram window. Something had changed. Not fragility, exposure. As if she had taken off her armor and wasn't sure yet whether she needed it back. At the office, the atmosphere felt strange, not hostile, expectant. Margaret hadn't shown up yet, but her absence felt intentional. Claire noticed Emily's state immediately. You look pale, she whispered. What happened? Emily hesitated. The past decided to reappear. Claire exhaled slowly. Of course it did. Now? Yeah, Emily said softly. Now! Before they could say more, an email notification popped up. Subject, update, internal request. Her heart pounded. She opened it with slightly trembling fingers. Emily, we are requesting your presence today at 4 p.m. to continue the review process. HR Claire read over her shoulder. So, today's the day. Emily nodded. Looks like it. But the universe wasn't done with her. Mid-morning, her phone lit up again. Another message from Thomas. I respect your time, but I need to tell you something important. I won't insist after this. Her stomach tightened. She didn't reply. Not yet. Across the city, Daniel tried to focus on work and failed miserably. The image of Emily by the canal, her eyes heavy with things unsaid, wouldn't leave his mind. He wasn't angry. He wasn't disappointed. He was careful. Daniel knew what it meant when the past resurfaced without warning. He knew how easily it could rearrange priorities, reopen wounds that looked healed, and he didn't want to become another pressure in her life. Early afternoon, he almost sent a message. Almost. But he stopped. Giving space was also a form of care. At exactly 4 p.m., Emily stepped into the HR office again. This time, Margaret wasn't there. The analyst smiled politely. Emily, we've reviewed your request thoroughly. Emily sat down, heart racing. Considering your performance record and the lack of technical justification for the reassignment, we've decided to suspend the previous decision. Emily blinked. I'm sorry. What? Your position will remain unchanged, the analyst continued. Additionally, we will be initiating a formal evaluation of the department's management. For a second, Emily couldn't breathe. The weight lifted so suddenly from her shoulders, she had to inhale deeply to keep from crying. Thank you, she managed. We understand it wasn't easy to bring this forward, the analyst added, but it was necessary. When Emily stepped back into the hallway, it felt like learning how to walk again. Claire was waiting. Well, Emily smiled, eyes shining. I'm staying. Claire pulled her into a tight hug. You won. Emily shook her head gently. No, I chose myself. Later, as she left the building, the sky was washed in shades of orange. The day had been long, heavy, transformative. She walked a few steps, then stopped. There was one more thing to resolve. She took a breath and replied to Thomas. If it's important, we can talk. Tonight. In a public place. His answer came almost immediately. Tonight works. Thank you. Daniel found out about the meeting through a short, honest message from Emily. I'm meeting someone from my past tonight. I thought you should know. He read it twice. Then replied, Thank you for telling me. I hope it goes well. When Emily read that, her chest tightened. There was no accusation, no drama, just respect. She met Thomas at a quiet cafe. The moment he walked in, the familiarity hit her instantly. The way he moved, the restrained smile, the eyes that had once known her better than almost anyone. Emily, he said, like her name still belonged there. Thomas. They sat across from each other. You look different, he said. So do you, she replied. Silence stretched between them. I'm not here to ask you to come back, Thomas finally said. I'm here to apologize. Emily lifted her eyes. For what? For leaving without knowing how to stay. For letting you carry alone things that were ours. Her throat tightened. I suffered, she said, steady but honest. But I survived. Thomas nodded. I know, and that's what hurts the most. I had to lose you to understand who you really were. Emily took a slow breath. Why now? He hesitated. Because I saw you choosing yourself, and I realized it might already be too late. The words lingered between them, and then Emily felt something unexpected. Peace. There was no anger left, no longing to return, just the quiet recognition that their love had been real and finished. I'm moving forward, she said gently, for real. Thomas gave her a sad smile. I figured. They parted without promises, without new wounds, only respect. When Emily stepped outside, the cold air touched her face like a beginning. She walked a few blocks before taking out her phone. She called Daniel. He answered on the second ring. Hey, she said. Can we meet? A brief pause. Of course. They met near the same canal, but this time it didn't feel heavy. Daniel studied her face carefully. Are you okay? Emily nodded. I am, in a different way. She stepped closer. I needed to close one door before trying to open another. He held her gaze. And did you? She breathed in deeply. I did. Silence settled between them, but it wasn't uncomfortable. Daniel reached for her hand slowly. Then maybe now. Emily didn't let him finish. She stepped forward, and this time when their lips met, there was no past standing between them, only the present and a future, waiting patiently. 15. The kiss lingered between them long after their lips parted. Emily felt like the world had lowered its volume, as if everything around them had faded into background noise, leaving only this new and terrifyingly real feeling. There was no urgency, no rush, just the quiet certainty that something had been crossed, an invisible line, and once crossed, There was no going back. Daniel kept his hands on her face a few seconds longer than necessary, as if trying to memorize the moment. "Are you sure?" he asked softly. Emily didn't answer right away. She looked at him, not just at the man standing in front of her, but at everything he carried, the fears, the silences, the almost escapes that had defined him. "I'm scared," she admitted, "but even so, I want this." Daniel nodded slowly. "Then stay," he said, not realizing he had just turned a request into a promise. They walked along the canal, fingers intertwined, the cold night air brushing their faces while something warm and steady formed between them. They didn't talk much. They didn't need to. In the days that followed, their relationship settled in quietly, respectfully, as if honoring the pace they both needed. They met after work, shared coffee, long walks, conversations that started small and ended in unexpected confessions. Emily noticed she was laughing more. Not the polite kind, not the careful kind, the kind that surprised her mid-sentence. Daniel, on the other hand, realized he was staying, emotionally, physically, fully, in a place he had always been afraid to remain. At the office, things were shifting too. The formal review of management had created an electric atmosphere. Margaret was quieter now, less imposing. Conversations in the hallway carried a different tone. For the first time, Emily felt her presence wasn't tolerated, it was recognized. One afternoon, Claire leaned against her desk and said, "Have you noticed how people actually listen to you now?" Emily thought about it for a moment. "I think I started listening to myself first." Daniel became part of her routine in the most natural way. Not invasive, not overwhelming, fitting. He saw her apartment, the books stacked in impossible places, the plants surviving mostly out of stubbornness. She saw his, minimal, almost too organized for someone who claimed not to crave control. One night, they cooked together. Nothing elaborate. Simple pasta, cheap wine, music playing low in the background. Emily watched him move around her kitchen with quiet focus and felt something tighten in her chest. It wasn't reckless passion. It was deeper, something that required responsibility. Later, sitting close on the couch, Daniel stared at nothing for a long moment before speaking. "There's something I never told you." Emily turned toward him. "What?" He inhaled slowly. "I've always left when things started to matter." She wasn't surprised. "Out of fear?" she asked. "Cowardice," he said honestly. "I called it freedom, but it was escape." The weight of his words settled between them. "And now?" she asked. He met her eyes. "Now I want to stay, even if I'm afraid." Her eyes filled instantly. She rested her head against his shoulder. "I don't need you to be perfect," she whispered. "I just need you to be real." He wrapped his arms around her in a long, quiet embrace, the kind that says more than any declaration ever could, but life, as it tends to do, had other plans. The next morning, as Emily was getting ready for work, her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost ignored it. She didn't. The offer was direct. An international company, a higher position, immediate recognition, a financial package that would change her life. And one detail that made her stomach drop. New York. She ended the call and sat on the edge of her bed, heart racing. It was the opportunity she had dreamed about for years, the one that always seemed to happen for other people, the one that validated every late night, every swallowed frustration, every invisible effort. But now she had something she hadn't had before, Daniel. The day moved in slow motion. The email with the official offer sat in her inbox, glowing almost defiantly. That night, she told him. Daniel listened quietly, face composed, thoughtful. "That's incredible," he said finally. "You deserve that." The words were sincere, and they hurt. "And what about us?" Emily asked, her voice barely steady. Daniel took a slow breath. "I don't want to be the reason you give up your life," he said. "And I don't ever want you to look at me one day and wonder who you could have been." Tears filled her eyes. "I don't want to choose between you and who I've become." He cupped her face gently. "Sometimes loving someone means not holding them back." The silence that followed was heavy, dense, almost unbearable. That night, Emily couldn't sleep. She walked through her apartment, reread the offer, thought about everything she had built, thought about the woman she was when she first arrived, invisible, wounded, quiet, and the woman now staring back at her in the mirror. She knew every choice had a cost. Staying meant emotional risk. Leaving meant loneliness again. At this point, love was no longer shelter. It was a decision, and Emily still didn't know which one she was brave enough to make. 16. Emily didn't respond to the offer for 2 days. 2 days where time felt thick, heavy, as if each minute carried its own weight. She woke up, got dressed, went to work, completed tasks. But everything felt slightly removed, like she was living in a parallel version of her own life. The world kept moving. Something inside her stayed suspended, waiting. She tried to be rational, made mental lists, pros and cons, career growth, recognition, the chance to finally step into a space she had always believed was hers, and on the other side, Daniel. Not just the man, but who she became when she was with him. The calm, the quiet courage, the feeling of being seen without needing to explain herself. She walked through the city like someone saying goodbye without admitting it, noticing things she had ignored before. The bakery on the corner, the sound of tram tracks, the way the canal lights shimmered at night. Everything felt significant. On the second night, she went back to the canal alone. The wind was sharp, unforgiving. She didn't care. She sat on the same bench where weeks earlier she had laughed without realizing it, where hope had existed without a name. She closed her eyes. "What do you want?" she whispered to herself. Not what made sense, not what was safest, but what would still feel right when the noise faded. She knew if she stayed, she might be happy, but she also knew she would carry the question for years. What if I had gone? She also knew if she left, she would lose something too precious to pretend didn't matter. The problem wasn't choosing, it was accepting the loss that came with it. The next morning, Daniel sensed the shift before she said anything. She sat across from him at their usual cafe, but something in her eyes had changed. Not coldness, protection. "You don't have to carry this alone," he said gently. She wrapped her hands around her coffee cup. "If I say it out loud, it becomes real." Daniel nodded. Sometimes reality hurts less than imagination. She didn't answer. They left without kissing that day. A small detail, but it echoed. That night, Emily opened the email again, read every line slowly. The words practically glowed: future, possibility, recognition. She inhaled deeply, and she accepted. The click was quiet, final, but the impact crashed through her like a wave. She cried, not from regret, from grief, for what she was leaving, for what could have been. 2 days later, she asked Daniel to meet her. They stood near the bridge, the sky grey, heavy, matching the moment. They walked side by side for a while before she stopped. "I accepted," she said, before courage could abandon her. "I'm moving to New York." Daniel closed his eyes for a brief second. "When?" "In a month." The silence that followed was dense, almost reverent. "I'm proud of you," he said finally. Her throat tightened. "I didn't want it to be like this." "I know," he replied, "but I never wanted to be the reason you made your dreams smaller." Tears slid down before she could stop them. "That doesn't mean what we had wasn't real," she whispered. He stepped closer, holding her face gently. "It was real," he said. "Maybe that's exactly why this is so hard." They held each other tightly, not like people promising forever, but like two people acknowledging how deeply they mattered in each other's story. The kiss that followed was different from all the others, slower, deeper, as if it needed to carry everything they wouldn't say later. There were no promises to wait, no dramatic declarations, just truth. The days after felt strange. The goodbye began in small absences, fewer messages, fewer meetings. Not because the love faded, but because letting go slowly hurt less than tearing it away all at once. Emily packed her apartment, boxes stacked against the walls. Every object she wrapped felt too recent. Every empty space echoed what she was leaving behind. At work, people celebrated her. Congratulations, smiles, applause. No one understood the cost. Daniel returned to his routine. But it didn't fit anymore. The apartment felt too large, too quiet. He caught himself waiting for messages that wouldn't come, thinking of comments he'd never get to say, coffee cups that would remain untouched across from him. He didn't regret letting her go. But that didn't make the absence lighter. On her last night in Berlin, Emily asked to see him. They met at the canal again, as if the place had become the silent witness to everything. The wind was colder now, the city quieter. "I'm afraid I'll regret this," she admitted. Daniel held her hand firmly. "Regret doesn't come from brave choices," he said. "It comes from not being true to yourself." "And us?" she asked, her voice breaking. Daniel gave her a sad, steady smile. "We existed," he said. "That's more than most people ever get." They stood there for a long time, neither wanting to be the first to walk away. When they finally did, there was no spectacle, just one last embrace, one last look. Emily got into the taxi before dawn, her chest tight, as Berlin slowly disappeared behind her, taking with it a version of herself that would never exist again. Across the city, Daniel stayed awake until sunrise, staring at the ceiling, feeling the absence like something physical, heavy, real. They both knew this wasn't the end, but it wasn't a beginning either. It was the painful space between what had been lived and what someday might still be. 17. Berlin was strangely quiet that night. Not the ordinary silence of winter, but a heavy kind of quiet, as if the entire city were holding its breath along with Emily. She walked slowly down the rain-slick sidewalk, her coat buttoned all the way up to her neck, her hands buried deep in her pockets, as if she could keep everything she was feeling contained inside them. Streetlights shimmered against the wet pavement, casting long shadows that seemed to follow her steps, memories, thoughts, fears she couldn't push away. Thomas had been back in the city for 3 days. 3 days since she found out by accident, running into a mutual friend at a cafe. 3 days since his name stopped living only in memory and started existing again in real life. 3 days of her heart behaving like an old house in the middle of a storm, creaking, shaking, on the verge of collapsing. She hadn't reached out, he hadn't either, and somehow that hurt more than any argument they'd ever had. Emily stopped in front of the dark window of a closed bookstore. Her reflection stared back at her. She barely recognized the woman in the glass. Deeper eyes, stronger features, a woman who had learned how to survive on her own, but never how to forget. "You still love him," she whispered to herself, feeling the weight of the truth settle in. Loving Thomas had never been a choice. It had been an event. She remembered too clearly the last time they were together, the suitcase open on the floor, the heavy silence between them, the sentence spoken out of impulse or fear that changed everything. Maybe love isn't enough. Emily closed her eyes. It still hurt. Across the city, Thomas stood by his window, staring out as if he could see every version of Emily that had ever existed. The apartment was almost empty. He hadn't found the courage to buy new furniture, as if doing so would mean accepting that life had moved on without her. On the table lay a crumpled envelope. He had opened and closed it so many times the paper looked tired. The letter he never sent. Thomas ran a hand through his hair and exhaled slowly. Coming back to Berlin had either been a mistake or the only honest decision he'd made in months of running from himself. He thought distance would help. That time would erase what he felt. But love doesn't disappear. It transforms, sometimes into longing, sometimes into guilt, sometimes into a quiet ache that follows you everywhere. I should have fought harder, he said aloud, as if the empty apartment could answer. That same night, fate decided to interfere. Emily stepped into the small corner market without really looking around. She was lost in her thoughts when a familiar voice cut through the air like electricity. "Emily!" The world stopped. She turned slowly, and there he was. Thomas looked different. Thinner, maybe more tired, but his eyes were the same. The eyes that had always found her in any room. For a few seconds, neither of them spoke. The silence between them was dense, filled with everything that had never been said. "Hi," she managed, her voice softer than she wanted. I didn't know if you still lived around here," he said, shifting nervously from one foot to the other. "I do." She forced a small smile. Some things don't change. Other things change too much. They walked out of the market together side by side, but with a careful distance between them, as if one step closer could reopen wounds that hadn't fully healed. "You came back," Emily said, trying to sound casual. "I did." He took a slow breath. "For you." She stopped walking. "Don't do that, Thomas." "Do what?" "Show up like this. Say things that shake me, like nothing happened." He looked at her, his eyes filled with something that looked a lot like regret. "Everything happened. And that's exactly why I'm here." The cold wind brushed against her face, but it was his words that took her breath away. "I left because I was scared," he continued. "Scared of not being enough. Scared of holding you back from a life you might have wanted." "And you decided that on your own?" Her voice trembled. "You decided for both of us?" Thomas lowered his head. "I was wrong." Tears threatened to fall. She didn't want to cry. Not there. Not in front of him. "You left when I needed you the most," she said, barely above a whisper, "and I had to learn how to move forward by myself." "I know." He stepped closer. "But I never stopped loving you. Not once." Silence settled between them again, broken only by the distant hum of the city. Emily took a deep breath. "Love isn't enough if there's no courage," she said. "I can't go through that again." Thomas looked at her with a mix of hope and fear. "Then tell me what to do." Her heart said one thing. Her mind said another. She held his gaze for a long moment. "Prove it," she said finally. "Not with promises. With presence." He nodded, as if this were the most important decision of his life. "I'll stay, as long as it takes." Something shifted inside her. A thin thread of hope. Fragile, but alive. "Then we take it slow," she said. "One step at a time." They walked together until the corner where their paths separated. Before saying goodbye, Thomas gently brushed his fingers against her hand, a simple gesture heavy with meaning. "Good night, Emily." "Good night, Thomas." She walked toward her building, heart racing, mind spinning. Nothing was resolved, nothing was certain. But for the first time in a long time, the future didn't feel like a place made only of loss. Thomas stood there, watching until she disappeared inside. A faint smile touched his lips. Sometimes love doesn't ask for guarantees. It asks for courage to begin again. And on that cold night in Berlin, two wounded hearts finally decided to stop running. 18. New York never sleeps. Emily learned that in her first week. The lights, the noise, the constant rush. As if the city itself were saying there was no room for emotional pauses here. That was exactly why she had come. Work, focus, momentum. But the heart doesn't respect time zones. In the small apartment she rented in Manhattan, Emily unpacked her life carefully. Each object carried an echo of Berlin. A forgotten mug, a scarf, a book Thomas had once mentioned in passing. She didn't cry, not yet. She was in survival mode. During the day, she was flawless. Meetings, decisions, praise. The company had made the right choice. Everyone said so. And on the surface, Emily agreed. But at night, the silence grew too loud. She started writing, not messages, not emails, just loose thoughts in a notebook she bought at the airport, words she didn't dare send to anyone. Distance doesn't erase, it amplifies. Meanwhile, in Berlin, Thomas was trying to relearn life without her. The places were the same, but they felt hollow. The cafe where she used to sit by the window, the street where they wandered without direction. Even his office felt larger somehow. He started running in the mornings again, like he used to before he met her. He thought exhausting his body might quiet his mind. It didn't. Sometimes he picked up his phone without thinking, ready to send something trivial, a picture, a random thought, any excuse to break the distance. He always stopped himself. If I text her now, I'll pull her backward, and he loved her too much to do that. Daniel watched from the sidelines. He noticed Thomas's silence, the way he avoided certain places, the way his laughter felt thinner. Daniel never tried to take a space that wasn't his. He knew exactly where his feelings ended and where respect began. "Do you two still talk?" he asked carefully one afternoon. Thomas shook his head. "No, but I think about her all the time." Daniel nodded. Sometimes love needs space to find out if it knows how to come back on its own. The words lingered. In New York, Emily started dreaming about Berlin. Not romantic dreams, simple ones. Thomas laughing at something stupid. The smell of coffee, the light touch of his hand at her waist as they crossed the street. She woke up with her chest tight and an uncomfortable certainty. Nothing had truly been finished. 2 weeks later, something shifted. Emily received an unexpected email, an invitation to speak at an international conference in Berlin. She read the location 3 times, as if the name might change. It didn't. Her heart sped up. Her stomach flipped. She closed the laptop and walked to the window. New York stretched out in front of her, massive, indifferent. But for the first time since she'd arrived, she didn't feel whole there. In Berlin, Thomas received news of his own. A project he'd been working on would be presented at that same conference. His name was on the participant list. He stared at the screen. "Is this some kind of joke?" he muttered. Apparently, fate had a sense of humor. In the days leading up to the trip, Emily felt something she hadn't felt in weeks. Anticipation, mixed with fear. She didn't tell anyone, not even herself. "It doesn't mean anything," she repeated. But it did. The flight was long. She tried to work, to read, to sleep. Nothing worked. Every mile felt like it was pulling her back toward a version of herself she still wasn't sure she was brave enough to face. When the plane landed in Berlin, something inside her relaxed. The air felt different, familiar. At the hotel, Emily took a deep breath before stepping outside. There were no plans, no messages, no promises, and yet every nerve in her body was awake. Thomas arrived in the city later that same day. As he walked down the main street near the conference venue, he felt that strange sensation, like something was about to happen. And it did. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't cinematic. They saw each other from a distance. Emily stepped out of a cafe, distracted, looking at her phone. Thomas was walking the opposite direction, talking to someone beside him. Their eyes met. Time slowed. For a second, neither of them moved. Then Emily smiled. A small smile, disbelieving, real. Thomas felt his chest tighten. "Emily," he said, not even realizing he'd spoken out loud. She walked toward him slowly, as if moving too fast might make the moment disappear. "Hi," she said. "Hi." Simple, but carrying everything that had never been said. "I didn't know you were coming," Thomas said. "I didn't either," she replied. "Until I did." They laughed, nervous, almost shy. There was no immediate hug, just presence. "You look different," he observed. "You do too," she said. "Stronger, or maybe just more honest." They walked together for a few minutes without direction. They talked about small things, work, the trip, the cold. But what mattered most was there, pulsing between every unspoken word. "I thought about you every day," Emily admitted, stopping. Thomas inhaled slowly. "Me too." Silence. "It still hurts," she added. "But it doesn't hurt empty," he replied. "It hurts alive." Her eyes filled. "I don't know what this means now," she said. Thomas stepped a little closer. "Maybe it doesn't have to mean anything today." She nodded. They didn't kiss. Not yet. But they walked side by side to the end of the street, like two people who understand that fate doesn't create encounters by accident. And in that moment, they both knew. The distance hadn't been the end. It had been a test, and love was still there, waiting for the next step. 19. Berlin was strangely quiet that night. Not the usual winter silence, but something heavier, as if the entire city were holding its breath, along with Emily. She walked slowly along the wet sidewalk, her coat pulled tight up to her neck, her hands buried deep in her pockets, as if she could contain everything she was feeling inside them. Streetlights reflected on the pavement, casting long shadows that seemed to follow her. Memories, thoughts, fears she couldn't shake. Thomas had been back in the city for 3 days since she found out by accident, running into a mutual friend at a cafe. 3 days since his name stopped being just a memory and became real again. 3 days of her heart behaving like an old house during a storm, creaking, shaking, threatening to collapse. She hadn't reached out. He hadn't either. And somehow, that hurt more than any argument they had ever had. Emily stopped in front of a closed bookstore window. Her reflection stared back at her, a face she barely recognized, deeper eyes, stronger lines. A woman who had learned how to survive on her own, but never how to forget. "You still love him," she whispered to herself, and the truth felt heavy. Loving Thomas had never been a choice. It had been an event. She remembered their last night together with painful clarity. The suitcase open on the floor, the thick silence between them. The sentence spoken out of fear or impulse that changed everything. "Maybe love isn't enough." Emily closed her eyes. It still hurt. Across the city, Thomas stood by his window, staring out as if he could see every version of Emily that had ever existed. His apartment was nearly empty. He hadn't had the courage to buy new furniture, as if doing so would mean admitting life had continued without her. On the table lay a wrinkled envelope. He had opened and closed it so many times, the paper itself looked tired. The letter he never sent. Thomas ran a hand through his hair and exhaled slowly. Coming back to Berlin had been a mistake, or maybe the only right decision after months of running from himself. He had thought distance would help. That time would erase what he felt. But love, he had learned, doesn't disappear. It transforms, sometimes into longing, sometimes into guilt, sometimes into a quiet ache that follows you everywhere. "I should have fought harder," he said out loud, as if the empty apartment could hear him. That same night, fate decided to interfere. Emily walked into the small corner market without really looking around. She was distracted, lost in her own thoughts, when a familiar voice cut through the air like electricity. "Emily?" The world stopped. She turned slowly, and there he was. Thomas looked different, thinner, maybe more tired, but his eyes were the same, the eyes that had always known how to find her. For a few seconds, neither of them spoke. The silence between them was dense, filled with everything that had never been said. "Hi," she managed, her voice softer than she intended. "I didn't know if you still lived around here," he said nervously, shifting his weight. "I do." She forced a small smile. "Some things don't change. Other things change too much." They both thought it. They walked out of the market together, side by side, but with careful space between them, as if one step closer might reopen wounds still healing. "You came back," Emily said, trying to sound casual. "I did." He took a breath. "For you." She stopped walking. "Don't do that, Thomas." "Do what?" "Show up like this. Say things that shake me, like nothing happened." He looked at her, eyes full of something that looked like regret. "Everything happened," he said, "and that's exactly why I'm here." The cold wind hit her face, but it was his words that took her breath away. "I left because I was afraid," he continued. "Afraid I wasn't enough, afraid of holding you back from a life you might have wanted." "And you decided that alone?" Her voice trembled. "You decided for both of us." Thomas lowered his head. "I was wrong." Tears threatened to fall. She refused to let them. Not there, not for him. "You left when I needed you most," she whispered, "and I had to learn how to move forward by myself." "I know." He stepped closer. "But I never stopped loving you, not once." Silence again, heavy, broken only by the distant hum of the city. Emily inhaled deeply. "Love isn't enough without courage," she said. "I can't go through all of that again." Thomas looked at her, hope and fear tangled together. "Then tell me what to do." She held his gaze for long seconds. Her heart said one thing, her mind said another. "Prove it," she finally said, "not with promises, with presence." He nodded as if this were the most important decision of his life. "I'll stay, as long as it takes." Something shifted inside her, a fragile thread of hope, alive. "Then we go slowly," she said, "one step at a time." They walked together to the corner where their paths separated. Before saying goodbye, Thomas lightly touched her hand, a simple gesture, heavy with meaning. "Good night, Emily." "Good night, Thomas." She walked toward her building, heart racing, mind in chaos. Nothing was resolved, nothing was certain. But for the first time in a long time, the future didn't feel like a place made only of loss. Thomas stayed there watching until she disappeared inside. A small, quiet smile touched his lips. Sometimes love doesn't ask for guarantees. It asks for courage to begin again. And on that cold Berlin night, two wounded hearts finally decided not to run anymore. 20 night fell over Berlin with its usual softness. But for Emily, everything felt different. The lights reflecting in the windows, the distant sound of the trams, the cool air brushing against her skin. It was as if the city had been waiting for this moment to breathe with her. She walked beside Thomas in silence, not because there were no words, but because some emotions don't like being interrupted. Every step carried weeks of distance, sleepless nights, hard decisions, questions that never found answers. I thought if I saw you again, everything would feel clearer, Emily said finally. But it's even more confusing. Thomas gave a small smile. Maybe clarity isn't the absence of fear, he said. Maybe it's choosing, even with it. Emily stopped walking. I was afraid to come back, she admitted. Afraid I'd see you and realize I had moved on. Or worse, afraid I hadn't. Thomas turned toward her, serious, gentle. And what did you realize? She took a slow breath. That no matter where I am, a part of me still lives on that bench by the canal, in that cafe, in you. The words hung between them, fragile, powerful. Thomas felt his heartbeat quicken. He had rehearsed 1,000 speeches during her absence. None of them felt big enough now. When you left, he began, I tried to be strong. I tried to understand. I told myself that love also means letting go. But every day without you taught me something I didn't want to learn. Emily looked at him carefully. What? That some people don't enter your life to pass through. They enter to stay, even when they leave. Silence again, heavier this time. Emily felt tears rise. I grew a lot these past months, she said. I became the woman I always wanted to be, independent, respected, strong. But every time I celebrated something, I missed you. Because success without someone to share it with is just noise. Thomas stepped closer. I don't want to be an obstacle in your life, Emily. You never were, she said quickly. You were home, and sometimes we have to get lost to understand where we belong. His heart pounded. I don't know how to make this work, he admitted. I don't know if you stay. I don't know if I go. I don't know if the world will even allow it. For the first time, she smiled through her tears. For the first time, I don't need to know everything. She took his hand. I just know that I love you. The word landed like silent thunder. Thomas closed his eyes for a brief second. When he opened them, something had shifted. Not desperation, not fear, courage. I love you too, he said, and I don't want to keep pretending that isn't enough. They held each other tightly. Not a goodbye hug, not just a reunion. Recognition. Right there, in the middle of the street, the world seemed to shrink. Emily inhaled his familiar scent, the warmth, the perfect fit, like coming home after a long journey. I received an offer, Thomas said quietly. An international project, New York. She pulled back, surprised. When? I haven't answered yet, he continued, because I needed to see you first. I needed to know if what I felt was past or future. Emily covered her mouth, overwhelmed. Thomas, I'm not saying I'll abandon everything, he added, but I am saying that, for the first time, I don't want to choose alone. Emily took a steady breath. I'm not the woman who runs from love to protect her career anymore, she said. And I'm not the woman who abandons her dreams out of fear of losing someone. She held his face in her hands. I'm the woman who understands that love and ambition don't have to be enemies. Thomas smiled, eyes shining. So, we try? She nodded. We try, with hard conversations, with fear, with flexible plans, but together. He kissed her, not rushed, not desperate, whole. A kiss that carried everything they had lived, and everything they still could. When they pulled away, Emily laughed softly. Look at us, she said, so different from when we first met. Good, Thomas replied, because now we're better. The conference happened in the following days, but Emily barely remembered it. What she remembered were the long coffees, the slow walks, the honest conversations that once had been postponed. Daniel watched from a distance with a quiet smile. He knew some stories don't end, they just ask for time. On her last night in Berlin, Emily and Thomas returned to the canal. Wherever life takes us, she said, I don't want to lose you to silence again. Thomas squeezed her hand. Neither do I. They didn't know exactly what the future would look like, but they knew something more important. Their love had survived distance, fear, hard choices, and that said everything. When Emily boarded the plane this time, she didn't feel like she was leaving something behind. She was carrying it with her. And on the other side of the ocean, Thomas wasn't standing still. He was moving toward what finally made sense. Because some stories don't begin when two people meet. They begin when they choose to stay. And tell me in the comments where you're watching from and which part of this story impacted you the most. Thank you for staying until the end. More stories are already on the way. See you in the next chapter.